بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الناصح الأمين. اللهم صل على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. ثم أما بعد. Ya marhaban. Alhamdulillah, we continue going over the tremendous book by the Fadil to Shaykh Al-Allama Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzan Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. That book, which is entitled Tanbihat That book which is entitled Tanbihat ala Ahkam Takhtassu bil Mu'minat. Rules or attention to rules and regulations upon the believing women. We are still on the chapter that deals with al-hayd, al-istihada, wal-nifas. That chapter that deals with the rules and regulations as relates to menstruation, the continual bleeding, and also postpartum bleeding. We had reached the section inside of this chapter that it deals with the ahkam, it deals with the rules and the regulations as relates to al-istihada. Al-istihada. Naam. Shaykh Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he mentions, he says, al-istihada سيلان الدم في غير وقته على سبيل التنزيف أو نزيف، على سبيل النزيف من عرق يسمى العاذل. The Shaykh, he mentions that al-istihada, and this is important for the women to know, that al-istihada, what it is an irregular vaginal bleeding. It's an irregular vaginal bleeding that comes outside of the time of the menses. It comes outside of the time of the menses. And it emanates from a vein that is called al-adhil. Al-adhil. This vein, يسمى al-adhil. نعم. Which is spelled alif, lam, ain, alif, ذل, لام. عاذل. نعم. عاذل. This is al-istihada. The woman who she is or has this condition, she is called al-mustahada. Al-mustahada. Naam. And for the woman who has this type of blood, and this is why it is very important, and bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, I would try to take my time and to reiterate things, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, and if there's any ambiguities or anything of that nature, then please feel free to text inside of the comment box for those who are online listening, or to send some correspondence over, as there are index cards that are located for the women to utilize. Bithnillahi ta'ala, so as to say repeat or whatever the case may be, or could you further clarify and explain on that particular concept? Al-istihada is very important that the women, they know it well. As the Shaykh, he says, wal-mustahada amruha mushkil. He said that the woman who has the condition of istihada, the woman, she is mustahada. She is the one who has the condition of al-istihada. Sheikh Fawzani says that her affair is a problem, is difficult. Is a difficult affair, mushkil. Na'am. The reason being, the Sheikh, he says, لاشتباه دم الحيض بدون الاستحاضة. It is an issue for the women because the blood of hayd and the blood of istihada, they could be very similar. They could be very similar. And in some cases, as we will come to see, they are indistinguishable from each other. They are indistinguishable from each other. So it's important that it is known exactly what to do when the bleeding becomes prolonged and it becomes irregular. Now, the Shaykh, he says, فَإِذَا كَانَ الدَّمْ يَنْزِلُ مِنْهَا بِاسْتِمْرَارٍ أَوْ غَالِبَ الْوَقْتِ. He says, so if the blood, it is emanating from her continuously, or for the majority of the time. Okay? So if she finds that she is bleeding for the majority of the month, or for the whole of the month, she continuously bleeds, then we will know that this is what al-istihada, that something is going on here, and all of this is not considered hayd. All of this is not considered menses. فَمَا الَّذِي, the Shaykh, he says, if she's bleeding continuously or for most of the time, فَمَا الَّذِي تَعْتَبِرُهُ مِنْهُ حَيْضًا وَمَا الَّذِي تَعْتَبِرُهُ الْإِسْتِحَاضَةِ. He says, so if she's bleeding for all of this time, then what will be considered her menses, and what will be considered the continual bleeding, istihada? How will we know what is what? ولا يعني because with the istihada لا تترك من أجله الصوم والصلاة. Because with the istihada, she does not leave off fasting nor praying. The woman who is continuously bleeding, the mustahada, she fasts and she prays. And this is different, of course, we know, from the woman who is upon her menses. The woman who is upon her menses, she does not fast and she does not pray. Whereas the one who is upon the continual bleeding, the mustahada, she fasts and she prays. So it's very important that we're able to distinguish and know what are those rules and regulations that are connected to identifying and distinguishing this from that. The Shaykh, he says, فَإِنَّ الْمُسْتَحَاضَ يُعْتَبِرُ لَهَا أَحْكَامُ الطَّاهِرَاتِ. Because the woman who is continuously bleeding, then she will be considered, and it will be applicable for her, the ahkam, the rules and the regulations of the women who are pure, or the women who are not in a state of menses, nor in a state of postpartum bleeding. The Shaykh, he says, وَبِنَاءً عَلَى ذَلِكَ فَإِنَّ الْمُسْتَحَاضَةَ لَهَا ثَلَاثَةُ حَالَاتٍ. He says, so upon this, building upon this, the woman who is in a state of continual bleeding, then she will be in either one of the three following cases. It will be one of the three following cases. Now, and this is very important, that I need all of the students, everyone who is hearing my voice, to make sure that they have with them a pen, and to make sure they have with them a piece of paper. Because these type of things you want to write down, and you want to record them well, so that you may go back and memorize these states, because there may come a day when you need them. Because as you women know better than I, becoming irregular, it can happen. It's not a thing where a woman is either irregular or she's not. She can be regular for a certain period of time, and then due to some changes in her body or whatever the case may be, she becomes irregular, right? She becomes irregular, and this happens. So it is important, so that if such a thing were to come about, then she would be able to know what to do and how to do it. The Shaykh, he mentions, he says, al-hala al-ula, the first condition, or the first state, right? أن تكون لها عادة معروفة, is that she has a known menstrual cycle. she has a known menstrual cycle. أن تكون لها عادة معروفة لديها قبل إصابتها باستحاضة, is that she has a regular menstrual cycle before she becomes one stricken with continual bleeding. Is that she has a known menstrual cycle. She has a known menstrual cycle before she becomes stricken with continual bleeding. بأن كانت قبل الاستحاضة تحيض 5 أيام أو 8 أيام مثلا. Meaning, or for example, that before she had this continual bleeding, that her menses will be for 5 days, or it will be for 8 days, so on and so forth. She knows her cycle. That generally, her cycle will last for 5 days, or it will last for 8 days, or so on and so forth, give or take, as every woman is different. Now, the Shaykh, he says, وَفِي أَوَّلِ الشَّهْرِ أَوْ وَسَطِهِ, and also that her menses generally comes in the beginning of the month, or it may generally come at the middle of the month, so on and so forth. فَتَعْرِفُ عَدَدَهَا وَوَقْتَهَا, so therefore she will know the days that she generally has her menses, and she will know what time of the month her menses usually comes, whether that be in the beginning of the month, the middle of the month, or the end of the month. And when it came at that particular time, it came for this amount of days or for that amount of days, so on and so forth. So in this scenario, the woman, she knows what time of the month her menses came, and she knows the duration. She knows how many days her menses would on average stay. How many days her menses would on average stay. فَهَذِهِ تَجْلِسُ قَدْرَ عَادَتِهَا. So this woman who's in this scenario, if she gets stricken with continual bleeding, then she would refrain from fasting, and she would refrain from prayer, and so on and so forth, during the times that she regularly gets her menses. Okay? So she bleeds, but continuously, but prior to that, her menses was known. Prior to that, she knew exactly how many days it lasted for, and generally when in the month did her menses come. Then at that time that was previously well known to her, then she would refrain from fasting and from praying during those days at that time of the month. And she would consider the bleeding that had taken place during that time to be the menses. And everything after that, then that will be what? That will be istihada. So during this time where she considered to be her menses because it matched her previous regular menstrual cycle, or the previous time where she got her menses, at this time tada as-salata was-siyama, that she will leave off the prayer and leave off the fasting. وتعتبر لها أحكام الحيض, and then for her, she would during that time she would apply the rules and regulations of menses. فإذا انتهت عادتها, and then when that general time is over for when she used to have those days and the like, when that time has elapsed, or those days when she should get her general her menses, اغتسلت وصلت, then at that time she would start to pray and start to fast. So again, she would refrain from praying and fasting during the time and for the days that she used to get her menses when it came regularly. So during that time and during those days, she will stop from praying and she will stop from fasting. And then anything that was after that, then she would make a ghusl. She would make a ghusl, and then she would pray. Okay? So again, if her menstrual cycle was known to her, exactly when it came and for how many days, and then she started to become irregular when she bled for most of the month or for all of the month, then those days when that she used to get her menses, she would stop from fasting and praying during those days. And anything that was after those days, then that will be considered istihada, and it will not be considered her menses. So when those days have elapsed and have concluded, then she would make a ghusl, and then she would continue, she would continue to fast and continue to pray. If that makes sense. Now, again, if it's unclear, please let me know, and I'll try my best to repeat it. The Shaykh goes on and he says, and the rest of the blood that will come down for the rest of the month after that time of the duration where she used to get her menses prior to being stricken with continual bleeding, then it will be considered istihada. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم لأم حبيبة, and this is according to the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, as he said to حبيبة رضي الله تعالى عنها, كثي قدر ما كانت تحبسك حيضتك. He told her that you will refrain for the same duration of time that your menses used to restrain you. So the same duration of time about when you used to get your menses, and it will hold you back for that same duration of time, and during those same days, then you refrain from fasting and from prayer and so on and so forth. ثُمَّ اغْتَسِلِي وَصَلِّي, and then after that, you make a ghusl, and then you begin to pray when those days are over. And this hadith has been collected by Imam Muslim, rahimahullah ta'ala. وَلِقَوْلِهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, and also due to the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لِفَاطِمَةَ bint Abi Hubaysh, and also due to the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكَ عِرْقٌ وَلَيْسَ بِحَيْضٍ فَإِذَا أَقْبَلَتْ حَيْضَتُكِ فَدَعَ الصَّلَاةِ. Hadith muttafaq alayh. And this is the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said that in commenting on the blood of istihada, that continuous blood, is that verily that is only emanating from a vein. That is emanating from a vein, and it is not your menses. So therefore, hold back, or when those days when you had your menses from before, then consider those days to be your menses. So and thus leave off the prayer and the like, and thus refrain from the prayer. If that makes sense. Naam. طيب. And again, this hadith is muttafaqun alayh. Hadith is muttafaqun alayh. So when your real menses period begins, then give up the performing of the prayer. And this is the case for the first scenario. The second scenario is حالة ثانية إذا لم يكن لها عادة معروف, is the instance where the woman previously she didn't have a menses that was known. She didn't have a menses that was known, where she can identify and say that I usually get my menses this time of the month for these amount of days. She didn't have that situation. Now, but دمها متميز بعضه يحمل صفة الحيض بأن يكون الأسود أو ثخينا أو له رائحة, وبقيته لا تحمل صفة الحيض. The second scenario is that a woman, she didn't have a regular menses from before, as such where she can identify that during this time and for these days, generally this is when I get my menses. She doesn't know that. However, in her case, she's able to distinguish between the two bloods, because the two bloods, they're different, right? She's able to distinguish. And again, I want everyone to pay very close attention to all three of these, because this is not always the case. The bloods are not always distinguishable from each other. Sometimes they come and they look exactly the same and she can't distinguish. And then in other women, the blood, they come in and they're very distinct, where the blood of the menses, it would carry the description of being very dark, or and very thick. It would be very dark and very thick, a dark burgundy, or even close, so dark it looks almost black, right? And it will be thick. and it will have a distinct odor to it, and so on and so forth. Whereas the rest of the blood, it wouldn't carry these descriptions. The rest of the blood, it will be lighter in its color. It wouldn't have the same odor. It wouldn't have the same thickness, and so on and so forth. It would be different. So she just by the blood itself, she will be able to identify that yes, this is the menstrual blood, and this is the blood of istihada. So for the one who she doesn't know, or she didn't have a regular menses that she was able to identify when it came and for how many days, then in her case, she will look at the blood itself to see, are they distinct from each other? So when she sees that blood that is the menses blood, then she will refrain from fasting and from prayer and so on and so forth. And then when she see that the description or the characteristics of the blood had changed, then at that point she would realize, okay, the menses is over. So then she will take a ghusl, and then she would resume prayer and fasting and so on and so forth. The Shaykh, he says that the other blood, the blood of istihada, is different. يعني بأن يكون أحمر ليس له رائحة ولا ثخينا. He said that the blood of istihada will be different, meaning that it will be red and it will not have that distinct odor and smell to it, and it will not be thick. ففي هذه الحالة تعتبر الدم الذي يحمل صفة الحيض حيضا. So in this case, the blood that comes and it bears the description of the menstrual blood, then she will consider that to be her menses. فَتَجْلِسُ وَتَدَعُ الصَّلَاةَ وَالصِّيَامِ. Then she would stop and she would refrain from prayer and she would refrain from fasting. وَتَعْتَبِرُ مَا عَدَاهُ إِصْتِحَاضَةً. And then she would consider all of the blood that is other than this, that doesn't have that description of the menstrual blood, to be the blood of istihada. تغتسل عند نهاية الذي يحمل صفة الحيض. She would stop, or she would make a ghusl after the blood that came bearing the description of the menstrual blood has ceased. Once that blood stops, then she'll make a ghusl. وَتُصَلِّي وَتُصُومِ. And then she would continue to fast and continue to pray. وَتُعْتَبَرُ طَاهِرًا. And she will be considered as one who is pure. Her purity has come. So all of the rules and the regulations of the woman when she's upon her purity are applicable, from intimate relations with the spouse, na'am, so on and so forth. She can make tawaf, na'am, and so on and so forth. And she can pray and she can fast and so on and so forth. Na'am, because she's what? She's pure. She's no longer in a state of menses. And this is لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, according to the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم لفاطمة: إذا كانت دم الحيض فإنه أسود يعرف فأمسكي عن الصلاة فإذا كان الآخر فلتوضئي وصلي. He says is that the Prophet ﷺ, he said what means that, and if it was the menstrual blood, then it will be black and it's known. It will be black and it will be known. Yeah? So therefore, withhold from the prayer. And when it's other than that, then at that point, make wudu and pray. Make wudu and pray. This hadith, rawahu Abu Dawood wa Nisa'i wa sahahahu Ibn Hibban wal Hakim. This hadith has been collected by Imam Abu Dawood wa Imam al-Nisa'i, and it was graded as authentic by Imam Ibn Hibban and al-Hakim. نعم. ففيه أن المستحاضة تعتبر صفة الدم. نعم. فتميزوا بها بين الحيض وغيره. So in this case, the mustahada, the woman who has the condition of continuous bleeding, then she would place the concern upon the characteristic of the blood itself. And she would distinguish between the blood that is the menses and the blood that is other than the menses. And when she sees this, she would do that. And when she sees that, she would do this. Now, meaning, when she sees the blood that has the characteristics of the menstrual blood, then at that point, she would consider that she's on her menses. When she no longer sees that blood having that description of the blood, it changes. It becomes lighter. It doesn't have the odor. It's not the same thickness and so on and so forth. Then this will be istihada, she would make a ghusl, and then she would pray, and so on and so forth. Now, the third scenario, وحالة ثالثة إذا لم يكن لها عادة تعرفها, is that if she never had a regular menses that she knows of. She never had a regular menses. Now, because this happens, some women, they don't have regular menses. ولا صفة تميز بها الحيض من غيره, and she doesn't have, she's not able to distinguish between the bloods. She's not able to distinguish between the bloods because they look almost identical. They look almost identical, and this is possible. This is possible now that the blood, it looks identical, and she can't distinguish between this and between that. Okay, in her case, what does she do? In the first case is easy, right? Because in the first case, she knows her menses, what time in the month it comes and for how many days. So during that time in the month and for those days, that's her menses. Anything after that is not considered to be her menses. The second case also is fairly easy in the sense that the bloods, each of them are distinct from each other. So when she sees the blood that looks like the menstrual blood, then she knows, okay, that's the menstrual blood. And when she sees the blood that doesn't look like that, then she knows, okay, that's istihada. Even if prior to that she didn't have a regular menses, now she's able to identify which is which because the bloods are distinctively different. But then you have certain cases where she never had a regular menses, right? Where she knows, okay, it came always at this time because it never came regularly. And when she has this continuous bleeding, she's not able to distinguish the blood of menses from the blood of istihada because they look almost identical, because their characteristics are almost identical, which is possible. It happens. Now, so what does she do? What does she do now? The Shaykh, he says, فَإِنَّهَا تَجْلِسُ غَالِبَ الْحَيْضِ ستة أيام أو 7 أيام من كل شهر. He says, then for her, she will have to consider, or she would have to consider as being the menses, right? That which is predominantly the time of menses, whether that be 6 days or whether that be 7 days from every month. So for her, she's going to say, okay, generally the women, right? Generally the women, they have their menses between this time and that time, rather 7 days or 6 days or so on and so forth every month. So for 6 or 7 days of that month, she's going to have to stop from praying and so on and so forth and consider that to be her menses. لأن هذه عادة غالب النساء, because this is the habit of most of the women. Most of the women, it's around 6 or 7 days or so on and so forth. Now, and the proof of this, لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم, is a statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم لحمنة بنت جحش إنما هي رقضة من الشيطان. That the Prophet ﷺ, he told her that this condition, when it comes like this, he said that this is like a strike from the shaitan, not like a hit or blow from the shaitan. فتحيضي 6 أيام أو 7 أيام. So therefore consider your menses to be 6 or 7 days. ثم اغتسلي, and then take a ghusl. فإذا استنقأت فصلي 24 أو 23 ويصوم وصلي فإن ذلك تجزئك. نعم. وكذلك فافعلي كما تحيض النساء. حديث رواه Imam al-Tirmidhi. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that verily this is only but a strike from the shaitan. So therefore consider your menses to be 6 or 7 days. 6 or 7 days. Then after which you will make a ghusl. And then you will continue and go on to pray for either 24 days or for 23 days. Now, and the statement from the Prophet ﷺ, 24 days or 23 days, this is based on the month being 30 days. This is based on the month being 30 days. So this is an example he's bringing, but taking as a reference that the month in this example is 30 days. So if she fasted, or excuse me, if she withheld for 6 days, right? If she withheld for 6 days and consider 6 days of that 30-day period to be her menses, then therefore what remains? 24 days. So then for 24 days she would pray, and for 24 days she would what? She would fast, right? And if she withheld for, considered to be her menses 7 days, 7 out of those 30 days, then the rest of the month, those other 23 days, is when she'll be praying and she will be fasting. Now, and this is what is meant by the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. So pray for 24 or for 23 days. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if she were to do that, then this would be sufficient. This would be sufficient. Now, so thus, do as consider to be your menses as the women consider to be their menses, as the women consider to be their menses. Some of the ulama, mashayikh, they mention how a woman will make this assessment, and those women that she would base the average upon as far as when and as far as how many days. Some of the ulama, they say it will be the women generally in her location. The women generally in her location. Now, in her, that can be her village or her town or province or so on and so forth. That what is the average for the women of that place, that region, then that's what she would consider. And likewise, whatever days or what have you is the average, then those are the days that she would choose and select. Others from the ulama, they say that what is even a better test for this and a better way of determining this is to look at the women in her immediate family. To look at the women in her immediate family. To see what is their average, what's average for them, and what days do they generally have their cycle. Now, because as we know, when people are close, and women, they know this better than I, but when people are close, you find it is very often that the menstrual cycles of the women will almost coincide with each other. They will almost coincide, like with sisters, right? Or and it's or with a mother and the daughter, and so on and so forth. That is very commonplace that their cycles will coincide when they're almost identical. Maybe a day or so off from each other, but they're almost the same cycle. So based on this, these mashaykh, they say, so therefore you base it on the women in your family. Whatever is their regular time of menses, and however long that time is, then you withhold for those same days. So when they get their menses, then you say, okay, this is also my menses, and so on and so forth. And that will suffice. And this is because it's a situation where she has no other sign by way in which so she's able to distinguish between this and between that. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said that if you were to do it based upon this, and again, this would be to the best of her ability and not given in that situation, then this would suffice her and this would be enough for her. Now, this would suffice. This would suffice. This would be sufficient. فالحاصل, and I hope does that make sense? بإذن ta'ala. I hope that makes sense. The Shaykh, he says, والحاصل مما سبق, and to recap what has preceded, أن المعتادة ترد إلى عادتها, is that the one who had a regular menstrual cycle, then she will return back to her regular menstrual cycle. Meaning that the one who had a menstrual cycle that was known, if she is stricken with continuous bleeding, then she'll just keep going on those same days that she always used to get her menstrual cycle, and she'll consider those days to be her menses. وَالْمُمَيِّزَةُ تُرَدُّ إِلَى الْعَمَلِ بِالْتَمْيِيزِ, and the woman who she didn't have a regular menstrual cycle, but she's able to distinguish because the bloods are different, they have different characteristics with her, then she will go based on the description, and she will go based on distinguishing this blood from that blood. So she would base her on the blood itself. So she'll know when to fast and pray and when to stop fasting and praying, because the characteristics of the blood would have changed. وَالْفَاقِدَةِ, and the one who she didn't have a regular menstrual cycle and her blood is indistinguishable from each other, then لهما يعني تحيض ستا أو سبعا. Then for her, then she would withhold and consider to be her menses either 6 or 7 days. فهذا الجمع بين السنن الثلاثة الواردة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم المستحاضة. And this is a compilation or a bringing together, a combining of all of the texts, because all of the texts that come on this issue from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they're studied and you look at them, you see that they describe each of these situations, each of these three scenarios. Now, so the guidance of what to do has been extracted for each of these scenarios directly from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وقال شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية, and Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said, وَعَلَامَاتُ الَّتِي قِيلَ بِهَا سِتٌّ. He said, and that the signs, that there are 6 distinctive features between menstruation and between the istihada. There are six identifying and distinctive features. He said, إِمَّا الْعَادَةِ, either the woman she would have a regular menstrual cycle. She was regular previously. فإن العادة أقوى العلامات. That the ada, a woman having a regular menstrual cycle, and then she gets istihada, going back to what was her regular menstrual cycle, this is the strongest of the signs. This is the strongest one, right? The strongest one. لأن الأصل مقام الحيض دون غيره. Because the origin in this case, she would fit the time of the hayd should make the match other than that. نعم. وإما التمييز, and as far as the one who's able to distinguish between the blood, لأن الدم الأسود والثخين والمنتن أولى أن يكون حيضا من الأحمر. Then for the one who she's able to distinguish is because the blood that is black or very dark, thick, and has an odor to it, then this blood takes precedence that this is menstrual blood over the blood that is red, it is thin, it's not thick, and it does not have the same odor. Does not have the same odor. So for her, this would be her way of distinguishing and knowing what to do and when to do it. نعم. وإما اعتبار الغالب عادة النساء لأن الأصل الحاق الفرد بأعم الأغلب. He said, and as far as the third scenario, then she would just consider herself or that she's upon her menses based upon what is the regular menstrual cycle of the women of her area or of the women, because the origin is that the individual will thus consider to be applicable to them what is applicable to the general masses. What is applicable to the general masses. نعم. فهذه علامات ثلاثة تدل عليها السنة والاعتبار. He says, so these signs, then this is what the sunnah states, what we learn from the sunnah, and this is the legal consideration. The legal consideration. ثم ذكر الباقي العلامات التي قيل بها. And then Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he mentioned the other 3 signs of which the ulama they mentioned. But because it's not the intention of Shaykh Fawzan to go into extreme depth and detail as relates to this particular affair, he just sufficed it as that. وقال في النهاية, and at the end of this, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said, والأصوب الأقوال لاعتبار علامات التي جاءت بها السنة وإلغاء ما سوى ذلك. He said, in the strongest of the opinions as relates to the one who has to abide by the menstrual cycles of the other women and so on and so forth, is that she coincides with those signs as it comes inside of the sunnah, and everything else is paid no mind or given no consideration. نعم. وما يلزم المستحاضة في حال الحكم بطهارتها. Now, we spoke about the blood and how she knows what is from what. But now the question comes, what is binding upon the woman who has this continuous bleeding during those days when she is pure, during those days when she's supposed to be praying and she's supposed to be fasting? And this is important to know because her situation is going to be slightly different than the women who do not have this condition of continuous bleeding. So we need to know, what is she to do? Firstly, يجب عليها أن تغتسل عند نهاية حيضتها المعتبرة حسب ما سبق بيانه, is that she would have to take a ghusl at the conclusion of her menstrual cycle in accordance to that which has previously preceded, in accordance to that which we have previously gone over. Now, so when her menstrual cycle is over, then she will have to take a ghusl. So this is one. She has to take a ghusl. So in this affair, she coincides with the rest of the women at the end of the menses. They have to take a ghusl. Now, but also for the woman who is afflicted with continual bleeding, تغسل فرجها إزالة ما عليه من الخارج عند كل صلاة. Now, it's different for the woman who has continuous bleeding, is that she has to wash her private area. She has to wash her private area before every prayer, right? She has to wash her private area before every prayer from whatever blood or what have you that may have come out between the prayers. She has to wash that. That's one. وتجعل في المخرج قطنا ونحوه يمنع الخارج, and she will have to put cotton, right? She will have to put pieces of cotton or that which is similar to it. So pieces of cotton or a sanitary napkin, right? She would have to use so as to prevent the blood from coming beyond that barrier. Now, so she would have to use cotton or sanitary napkin or the like to stop the blood from touching her other clothes. Okay? وتشد عليها ما يمسكه من السقوط, and she would have to fasten it. So that piece of cotton or the sanitary napkin and the like, she would have to fasten it and to make sure that it's worn in such a way that it won't fall down. To make sure that it's worn in such a way that it won't fall down. Now, so she would have to secure it to her person, making sure that it won't fall down or greatly move outside of its place and thus not fulfill its purpose. Then she would have to make wudu. What is different for the woman who has continuous bleeding in that she has to make wudu عند دخول وقت كل صلاة, is that she has to make wudu once every prayer has entered. She has to make wudu for every prayer. Now, and her wudu cannot carry over from prayer to prayer. It can't. Now, but for example, so when the time for dhuhr is in, she has to make wudu for dhuhr. She can't say, I'm going to go off of my wudu from the early morning. Maybe she woke up prior to dhuhr. She's been up since fajr, مثلا. Now, so she made wudu and she prayed duha. مثلا, على سبيل المثال. For example, she made wudu and she prayed duha. Salatul duha. نعم. طيب. Salatul duha, we know what is before dhuhr. She can't pray dhuhr on the wudu from duha. No. But once dhuhr has come in, she has to make wudu again for dhuhr. And she has to check to make sure there's any blood or anything like this. Then she has to wash that away. Now, secure her padding and then make wudu. So she has to make wudu when every prayer comes in. Every prayer comes in. Okay? She can't pray 2 prayers with 1 wudu. Every prayer has to have its own wudu in its time. And if she made wudu before its time, right? For example, she made wudu in the time of dhuhr, and then Asr came in. Let's say she made wudu at the end of the time of dhuhr. It was the end of the time of dhuhr. And then 10 minutes later, Asr came in. She's not allowed to pray Asr with the wudu that she made in the time of dhuhr, but she will have to make wudu again in the time of Asr to pray Asr. Now, that's a very important point that it has to be known. Now, but and this is one of the difference, but as relates to her case. Also, the Shaykh, he says, and this is according to لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم في المستحاضة. This is according to the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم as relates to the woman who continuously bleeds. تدعو صلاة أيام أقرائها ثم تغتسل وتتوضأ عند كل صلاة. The Prophet ﷺ, he told her, then leave off the prayer during the days in which are considered that your menses in your case, and then make a ghusl, and then make wudu before every prayer. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, عند كل صلاة, before every prayer. Hadith رواه Abu Dawud wa Ibn Majah wa Tirmidhi. This hadith was collected by Imam Abu Dawud, wa Imam Ibn Majah, wa Imam Tirmidhi, and Imam at-Tirmidhi, his name could also be pronounced Turmadi. Naam, either Tirmidhi or Turmadi. Now, وقال, and Imam at-Tirmidhi or Imam at-Turmadi, he said hadithun hasan, that this hadith is hasan. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, and the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, أن أعدت لك الكرسف. نعم, الكرسف. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and I advise you to use the kursuf. Well, kursuf, نعم, the meaning of kursuf is qutun, نعم, a تحشين به المكان, والكرسف قطن, ويمكن استعمال الحافظ الطبية الموجود الآن. And the kursuf, this is cotton, meaning to preserve the area in which the blood it comes down from, right? To utilize this kursuf at that area. And kursuf, the meaning of it is qutun. So again, kursuf, and it's spelled kaf ra sin fa. Kursuf. This is al-qutun. This is cotton. This is cotton. Naam. So kursuf, it means cotton. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I advise you to use the cotton. Naam. The Shaykh, he mentions, he said, and also it is possible that the sanitary napkins can also be utilized for this purpose. And also the sanitary napkins that are present today can also be utilized for this purpose as well. And it will fit the bill and is not restricted to just cotton. Naam. And then the Shaykh, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he gets into the ahkam of nifas. He gets into the ahkam of the postpartum bleeding. But we will stop at this point and save that for the next class. فنتوقف هنا فنكتفي بهذا القدر. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وجزاكم الله خيرا.